We streamed from an abandoned sea containment facility. Part 1: The Intake Pools. My name is Leo. I am 32 years old. I am writing this from a laptop inside a coastal concrete bunker, 6 miles north of Cape Perpetua. If you search for this location on satellite maps, you will only see an empty stretch of jagged black rocks and heavy gray surf. But if you walk along the cliffs during a low tide, you will find the drainage tunnels. 3 days ago, my girlfriend Maya and our friend Jace drove up here in Jace's Jeep. Jace ran an urban exploration channel on YouTube. He called it the Off-Grid Project. He had about 40,000 subscribers. He wanted a video that would break 100,000 views. He found an old maritime manifest from 1974. The document described a defunct government facility called the Pacific Marine Isolation Annex. Officially, it was built to study deep-sea core samples. Unofficially, it was abandoned in a hurry. We arrived at the cliffside at 4:00 p.m. The sky was the color of wet slate. Jace had his Sony camera mounted on a stabilization rig. He was already talking to his audience, using his high-energy vlogger voice. It sounded so incredibly fake out there, in that massive, cold, lonely landscape. Let me pull up the first text message thread. Jace had run down the cliff face ahead of us to check the entry hatch near the water's edge. Maya and I were still carrying the heavy gear bags down the slippery gravel path. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Jace texted, "Leo, hurry up. You guys need to see the intake pools. Bring the wide lens camera." I replied, "We're coming. Path is washed out. Be careful with the tide." Jace wrote back, "The tide doesn't matter. The water in the intake pool isn't moving with the ocean. It's totally still. And Leo, it's hot." I paused on the trail when I read that. I looked down at the concrete structures below us. The facility was half submerged in the gray Pacific. Huge concrete walls, 6 feet thick, built directly into the black basalt rock to withstand the winter storms. The facility had been dead for over 50 years. There was no electricity. There were no generators. Why would the water inside the intake pools be hot? When Maya and I reached the lower deck, Jace was kneeling by the edge of a massive, square concrete reservoir. The ocean was crashing violently against the outer seawall, throwing freezing white spray into the air. But inside the reservoir, the water was smooth as glass, black thick. And Jace was right. A dense, oily steam was rising off the surface. It smelled like boiled seaweed and old, rusting copper pipes. Jace looked up at us, his camera lens reflecting the gray sky. "Touch it," he whispered. He wasn't using his YouTube voice anymore. I leaned down. I dipped my index finger into the black water. It felt like lukewarm dishwater, slippery, oily. But that wasn't the disturbing part. When I pulled my hand back, the water didn't bead off my skin. It stayed attached, forming a thin, transparent film over my fingers, like a layer of liquid plastic. I had to wipe my hand forcefully against my jeans to get it off. Jace pointed his camera down into the steam. "Look at the bottom," he said. The pool was about 15 feet deep. The concrete walls of the tank went straight down into the dark. Near the very bottom, beneath the steam, I could see something pale. It looked like an old, white nylon rope coiled up in the corner of the pool. But as we watched, the rope slowly uncoiled. It didn't float. It dragged itself along the concrete floor, leaving a dark, greasy trail in the sediment. It wasn't a rope. It was a long, thin, hairless human arm, with 5 distinct, elongated fingers. Part 2: The Cold Overlay. Jace didn't stop filming. He was ecstatic. He thought he had found a rare deep-sea siphonophore, or a giant ribbon worm that had washed into the facility during a storm. "This is the golden ticket," he kept whispering. "This is 1,000,000 views." Maya wanted to leave. She stood near the rusted iron entry hatch, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets. She was shivering. "Leo," she said to me, her voice was small. "The air is different down here. It hurts my teeth." I knew what she meant. There was a strange, high-pressure sensation in the air, like the feeling in your ears right before a massive lightning strike. But we didn't leave. Jace had already pried open the heavy steel hatch with a crowbar. The hinges broke with a loud, metallic scream that echoed deep inside the dark concrete corridors. We stepped inside. The interior of the facility was pitch black. The air was warm and incredibly humid. Our flashlights cut through the dark, revealing endless rows of green-painted pipes and gray concrete walls covered in salt crust. We walked down the main corridor, sub-level 1. Jace was walking 5 paces ahead, holding his camera rig, whispering commentary into his microphone. Maya and I walked behind him, holding hands. Her palm was freezing cold. It felt wet. Let me check the messages from that hour. Maya and I didn't want to speak out loud, because our voices were echoing too loudly off the concrete. Every word sounded like it was being repeated by someone 3 rooms away. So, we texted each other while we walked. Maya wrote, "Leo, look at the walls, not the pipes, the concrete." I looked to my right. I ran my flashlight beam along the wall. The concrete was covered in salt, but beneath the salt, there were markings. They weren't serial numbers. They weren't government stamps. They were deep, vertical gouges. Like someone had taken a heavy steel rake and dragged it down the walls with immense force. I texted her back, probably from old demolition equipment when they cleared the facility out. She replied instantly, "No, look closer at the gouges. They are narrow at the top, wide at the bottom. That's not a machine, Leo. Those are fingernail marks." I stopped walking. I leaned close to the wall. I touched one of the grooves. The concrete had been pulverized. To make a mark that deep in reinforced industrial concrete, you would need hydraulic pressure or bones stronger than iron. And then I noticed something else. The gouges weren't on the walls of the corridor. We were walking past a row of massive, thick observation windows. The glass was 6 inches thick, reinforced with wire mesh. The scratches weren't on our side of the glass. They were on the inside. Whatever had made those marks had been trapped behind the glass, scratching frantically to get out into the hallway where we were currently standing. Jace called out from 30 feet ahead. "Hey, come look at this. I found the primary tank room." His voice sounded weirdly distorted. It didn't sound like it was coming from his mouth. It sounded like it was being played out of a cheap, blown-out speaker. Maya gripped my hand harder. "Leo," she whispered, "that doesn't sound like Jace." I looked down at my phone. A text message from Jace had just arrived. "Leo, Maya, don't go into the tank room. I dropped my camera down the stairs. I'm back near the entrance hatch trying to fix the battery." I stared at the screen. I looked up at the dark hallway ahead. I could see Jace's silhouette standing at the end of the corridor, right outside the doorway to the tank room. The silhouette was holding a camera rig. It turned its head toward us. And then Jace's voice called out again, from that dark silhouette. "Come on, guys, why are you stopping? The water is beautiful down here." Part 3, the high-res blur. I need to take a second. My heart is hitting my ribs so hard it makes my chest ache. I am looking at the video file Jace's camera recorded during that specific minute. I managed to recover the SD card later. In the video, the camera is steady. It is pointing down the long corridor toward Maya and me. We look tiny in the frame, illuminated only by our own flashlights. But the entity holding the camera, it isn't Jace. The camera rig is mounted to a pale, gray shoulder structure. The skin is wet, shiny, and completely translucent. You can see the dark, bluish veins pulsing beneath the flesh like bundles of earthworms. The entity is incredibly tall, nearly 7 feet, its spine bent at a horrific, unnatural angle to avoid hitting the concrete ceiling pipes. But it was using Jace's voice, perfect mimicry. Back in the real moment, I didn't see the creature's skin, I only saw the silhouette in the dark. I grabbed Maya's arm, and we backed away slowly, returning the way we came. I pulled out my phone. My thumbs were shaking so badly I kept hitting the wrong keys. I texted Jace, "Jace, we are coming back to the hatch right now. Do not move, do not say anything." Jace replied, "I'm at the hatch, where are you guys? I hear a whistling sound in the pipes." We ran. We didn't care about the noise anymore. Our boots slammed against the wet concrete, creating a chaotic storm of echoes. Behind us, from the dark corridor, we heard the silhouette follow. It didn't run like a human. It was a wet, heavy, slapping sound. Like a massive, 100-pound fish being dropped onto concrete from a high distance, over and over again. Slap, slide, slap, slide. But it was moving fast, faster than we could run. We reached the entry hatch. Jace was there. He was sitting on a plastic equipment crate, holding a flashlight, his face completely white. "Did you guys hear that?" Jace said, standing up quickly. "Something is in the walls, something is singing." "We need to go," I gasped, grabbing the edge of the steel hatch to pull it shut. But the hatch wouldn't move. The heavy iron door had been warped. The steel plate was bent outward, as if something had hit it from the inside with the force of a truck. The locking mechanism was completely sheared off. We were locked in, not from the outside, but because the exit frame had been destroyed. Maya looked out through the narrow gap in the hatch. The ocean was rising. The tide was coming in early. The black rocks where we had parked the Jeep were already underwater. Huge, gray waves were slamming directly against the exterior of the concrete bunker, sending streams of freezing sea water rushing under the door frame. We were trapped between the rising ocean and the thing in the corridor. My phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number, 444-1974. The text read, "The facility does not contain the specimens. The specimens built the facility. It is an extension of the shelf. Welcome to the lower lungs." I looked at the text. I showed it to Jace. Jace stared at the screen. Then he looked down at his own camera bag. "Leo," Jace whispered, "my phone has been dead since we left the car. The battery exploded in the heat on the dashboard." He pulled his phone out of his pocket. The plastic casing was melted, the screen was shattered, a dark, dead streak of purple ink across the glass. Then, whose number had I been texting for the last hour? Part 4, the mimic dialect. Let me check my logs. I am looking at the timeline. It doesn't make sense. The timestamps on my phone say we entered the facility at 4:00 p.m. But the text messages from the unknown number, the ones I thought were from Jace, they are timestamped from yesterday, and some of them are timestamped from next week. The time logic inside this place is breaking down. The humidity is doing something to the quartz crystals in the phone's processor. Or maybe my brain is just refusing to register the reality of the situation. We had no choice but to move up. The lower corridors were completely flooded now. The lukewarm, Black water from the intake pools was rushing through the drainage grates, filling sub-level 1 up to our ankles. We climbed a narrow, rusted iron spiral staircase to sub-level 2. This level was different. It looked like an old residential quarters for the facility staff. Small concrete rooms with iron bed frames, everything was rotting. The mattresses had turned into black, slimy soil. We hid inside an old laundry room. Jace sat in the corner, his camera rig turned off now. He was staring at the floor, his mouth open slightly. He was humming. A low, repetitive, 3-note melody. H. Jace, I said, my voice harsh in the small room. Stop that. He didn't stop. He didn't even blink. Maya leaned against my shoulder. She was dry heaving. The smell of the water was getting stronger. It smelled like a whale carcass that had been baking in the sun for a month. My phone chimed. A text from Maya's number. I looked down at her. Her hands were in her lap. Her phone was sitting on the concrete floor between her feet. The screen was dark. But my phone received the message anyway. From Maya, Leo, I'm sorry I couldn't save you. The water is so clean down here. You don't have to breathe. Your lungs just fill up with grease. And then you can hear the deep track. I looked at the real Maya sitting next to me. She turned her head to look at me. Her skin looked different under the flashlight beam. Her face looked slightly flattened, like a photograph that had been stretched horizontally. Her nose was smaller, her upper lip was gone, her skin pulled tight across her teeth. Leo, she said. Her voice didn't come from her throat. The sound came from the floorboards, from the drainage grate in the corner of the laundry room. Leo, why are you looking at me like that? I'm right here. I jumped back, hitting my head against a metal shelf. Get away from me, I screamed. Jace stopped humming. He stood up in a single, fluid motion. He didn't use his hands to push himself off the floor. His legs just straightened, like a puppet being pulled up by a wire. He looked at Maya. Maya looked at Jace. They both turned their heads 60 degrees to the left, in perfect sync. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the wall. Behind the concrete wall, something was tapping. A rhythmic, wet click, like the sound of a dolphin's echolocation, but deeper, much deeper, a sound that vibrated through the marrow of my bones. Click, 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 click. Then the wall began to bleed. The salt crust on the concrete softened, turning into a thick, gray slime. Two pale, translucent hands pushed through the solid concrete. The stone didn't crack, it yielded like wet clay. The fingers were long, webbed with a thin, purple membrane. The fingernails were jagged, black pieces of horn. The hands reached out, grasping the air, searching for something to hold onto. And then a head emerged from the wall. It had no eyes, just smooth, white skin where the orbital sockets should have been. But it had Maya's hair, long, dark strands of hair, soaked in black grease, clinging to its hairless, elongated skull. Its mouth split open, from ear to ear. Inside, there were 3 rows of thin needle-like teeth, all curving backward toward its throat. It opened its mouth, and Jace's YouTube voice came out of it. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to show you how to die. Part 5, the abyssal C-frame. I ran. I didn't look back to see if Jace or Maya followed me. I ran down the upper corridor, my flashlight beam cutting through the thick, gray fog that was now pouring out of the ventilation ducts. The facility was alive. It wasn't a building. It was a concrete shell grown over an organic reef. The pipes weren't carrying water. They were pulsing with a thick, dark fluid that looked like hot blood. I found a heavy, reinforced steel security door at the end of sub-level 2. It looked like an old radio room. I threw myself inside and slammed the door shut. There was a manual deadbolt. I threw it. The iron bar slid into the frame with a heavy, solid click. I was alone. The room was small. It contained an old steel desk, a broken radio transmitter from the 1970s, and a stack of water-damaged logbooks. I fell to my knees behind the desk. My breathing was ragged, a dry, whistling gasp that sounded exactly like the entity's throat. I pulled out my phone. The screen was completely glitched out. The pixels were shifting, forming weird, geometric patterns that looked like ancient cuneiform script. But then the text started again. Hundreds of them, coming through every second. From Maya's number, from Jace's number, from my mom's number, from numbers I didn't recognize. 00001. 00002. They were all saying the same thing. The water is rising, Leo. The tide is at the glass. Look at the window. I paused. I turned my flashlight toward the back wall of the radio room. There was no window there before. It was a solid concrete wall. But now there was a circular porthole, a heavy, bronze-framed window looking out into the open ocean. The water outside was pitch black. The high tide had completely submerged the room from the outside. I walked over to the glass. I pressed my forehead against the cold circle. Through the dark water, I could see the cliff face. But it wasn't empty. There were hundreds of them. The sirens of the trench. They were clinging to the black basalt rocks, their long, pale, hairless bodies undulating in the heavy surf like giant sea anemones. They had no eyes, but they were all facing the window. They knew I was looking at them. And in the center of the swarm, floating right outside the glass, were Jace and Maya. Their clothes were gone. Their skin had already turned that translucent, vein-streaked gray. Their fingers had elongated, the webbed membranes growing between their knuckles even as I watched. Maya floated close to the glass. She pressed her face against the window, her nose flattened against the surface, just like the creature inside the wall. She smiled, her jaw unhinged, revealing the needle teeth. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. My phone vibrated in my hand. A message from her. We didn't come here to make a video, Leo. We were called back. You were the only one who forgot the song. Part 6, the retroactive cache. I am sitting behind the desk again. The water is leaking under the security door. It's warm. It's already up to my shins. The laptop I am using to write this, it isn't mine. I didn't bring a laptop in my backpack. I only brought a flashlight and some ropes. I looked closer at the machine on the desk. It's an old IBM terminal from 1982. The green phosphor screen is flickering, a soft hum that hurts my eyes. The keys are mechanical, clicking loudly as I type. I need to question reality for a second. Did Jace have a YouTube channel? I open my memory, trying to picture his face. I can't. When I think of Jace, I only see the silhouette with the camera rig. When I think of Maya, I only see the white, smooth skin with no eyes. I look down at my own hands. My skin is dry, it's gray. I try to move my fingers, but they feel heavy, they feel long. I run my left hand over my right wrist. There are no hair follicles, there are no pores. The skin is completely smooth, like the surface of a boiled fish. I look at the logbook on the desk. The ink is faded, but the handwriting is mine. I recognize the specific way I cross my T's. The log entry is dated June 20th, 1974. The text reads, Subject 3 has established voice mimicry. It is using the dialect of the junior technician, Leo Vance. It has successfully convinced the remaining staff that it is human. The security doors have been breached from the inside. The water is warm. We are filling the lungs now. My name is Leo Vance. I am not a 32-year-old man. I am not an urban explorer. There is no YouTube channel. YouTube won't be invented for another 30 years. Part 7, the recontextualization. The realization is hitting me now, like a wave of cold brine. The text messages on my phone, they weren't digital packets sent over a cellular network. The phone in my hand, it's not a phone. It is a rectangular piece of polished, black obsidian stone, a fragment of the deep trench rock that I have been holding against my ear for hours. The vibrations I felt, the chimes, the notifications, they were the ultrasonic clicks of the entities outside the glass, traveling through the stone, directly into the bones of my skull. The facility didn't get abandoned in 1974. We didn't drive here in a Jeep. We have been down here since the project started. The teens I remembered, Jace and Maya, they weren't my friends. They were the last two researchers who entered the intake pools in 1994. The creature doesn't hunt by killing your body. It consumes your chronology. It takes your memories of the surface, and it mixes them with the memories of everyone else it has ever dissolved in the hot pools. It builds a fake timeline inside your head, a loop of videos and texts and modern technology to keep your brain busy while your lungs slowly turn into grease. I look at the bronze porthole. The glass is beginning to crack. Small, white lines are spreading across the circular frame. The water outside isn't dark anymore. It's glowing with a pale, bioluminescent green light. Thousands of faces are pressing against the glass now, not just Jace and Maya. The entire staff of the 1974 project, the coastal tribes who lived on these rocks 400 years ago, the Spanish sailors whose galleon wrecked on this reef in 1602. They are all using Jace's voice now, a massive, thunderous chorus of 40,000 subscribers, all shouting at the screen. Don't forget to like The Ocean Screams. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a comment below and let us know what it feels like to drown. The glass shatters. The warm, black water hits my chest. It doesn't feel like drowning. It feels like coming home. The screen is going dark now. The green phosphor text is dissolving into pixels. If you are listening to this narrator's voice, if you are watching this video on your phone, check the skin on your knuckles. Press your thumb against your wrist. Is it cold? Is it wet? Do you hear that low, 3-note melody humming from the pipes behind your wall? Don't look away from the screen. The water is rising in your room too. And the tide. The tide is coming in early.